The mud at Humen is the color of old tea. June rain slicks the earth into a sucking glue that clings to boots and hems, binding silk and leather to the Pearl River's shore. Bamboo scaffolds creak above pits cut into the ground like open mouths. Soldiers in quilted jackets and lacquered helmets heave heavy wooden chests onto the lip of the trench. Each chest is stamped in black or red with foreign marks, DC & Co., Jardine Matheson, merchant names hammered into wood like a boast. The crowbars rise and fall. Iron bites into planks with a splintering crack. The lids give way. Inside, bricks wrapped in waxed paper, the faint reek of camphor failing to mask the heavier, sweet-sour smell of raw opium paste. When the bricks hit the seawater pooled in the pits, the surface blooms with oily swirls, and then the quicklime the soldiers have shoveled in begins to hiss, devouring the contraband in a white, choking steam. Men cough and turn away, sleeves over faces, eyes watering as alkaline smoke drifts across the fort. At the edge of the pit stands a man whose name will be cursed in London and carved in stone in Fuzhou, Lin Zexu, imperial commissioner to the Daoguan emperor. His court robe, stiff silk, dark with embroidered dragons, hangs heavy in the damp air. Beneath it his back aches, he has been on his feet for hours, days, weeks. Clerks cluster near him with tall bamboo tally sticks, counting each chest as it is broken and poured away. 20,000 chests. More than 1,000,000 kilograms. Years of profits melting into mud and lime. Behind a line of Qing bannermen, tall in their Q braids and iron helmets, another group watches from a distance, British merchants, some in crumpled linen, some still clinging to their tailored coats, boots speckled with mud. They are not permitted closer. They see only the outlines of their fortunes dissolving in the white breath of the pit. One of them, Lancelot Dent, of Dent & Company, clenches a cane so hard his knuckles pale. He has already been held under quasi-house arrest in the foreign factories at Canton, food cut off, ships immobilized, until he and his peers signed over their opium stock. Now, as the chests are smashed one by one, he is counting a different ledger, not the loss, but the revenge. The clock is running in more than one direction. To the north in Beijing, the emperor has given Lin a blunt ultimatum: stop the opium flood, halt the empire's drain of silver and the spread of addiction, before the next harvest season. If the treasury's silver continues to vanish, tax remittances will falter, grain prices will spike, provincials will riot, and the mandate of heaven, already trembling under droughts and banditry, could crack. Lin knows this. He has read the memorials of local officials who cannot pay troops, of counties where men lie sprawled in opium stupor while fields go untilled. He also knows that every chest tumbling into the lime pit has an owner across the water. Men with insurance policies, allies in parliament, relatives in the East India Company's boardrooms. Men whose ships hang at anchor off Lintin Island, their holds reeking of poppy resin from Bengal and Malva. In a lacquered document case near Lin's desk, away from the smoke, lies a different kind of artifact, a letter, ink brushed onto silk in his careful, square script. It is addressed to a woman he has never seen, the Queen of Great Britain. In it he has written what his conscience demanded: would you allow this poison in your own country? Would you tolerate foreigners flooding your towns with a drug that empties households, ruins soldiers, and steals the very silver from your coffers? He appeals not to trade policy, but to moral reciprocity. The letter will travel by ship and courier, passing through many hands. In London it will be read with furrowed brows and then, soon enough, shelved. The destruction happening here, in the mud of Humen, will be read in a very different way, not as a state defending its people from a narcotic plague, but as an oriental despot destroying British property. The crowbar falls again. Another chest yields. The air thickens with heat and alkali and the faint, rotten fruit sweetness of opium dying in the water. The question rises with the steam: in forcing this destruction, in standing firm on soaked earth with banners snapping overhead, has Lin Zexu just handed the world's preeminent naval power the excuse it needed to turn a drug racket into a shooting war? How did a garden flower from the banks of the Ganges become a weapon sharp enough to pry open the gates of the largest empire on earth? To answer that, we have to start not in the fort at Humen, but in a different field, under a different sun. Imagine the poppy, Papaver somniferum, in full bloom in the plains of Bengal and Bihar. Pale petals like crumpled parchment, nodding under a dry season sky. At dawn, laborers move through the green rows with small, curved blades, scoring each bulb with practiced flicks of the wrist. Milky latex seeps out and congeals over the day into brownish tears. At dusk they return, scraping it off into small balls that will be pressed and packed into standardized cakes. This is not a folk herb for the village healer. This is industrialized intoxication. By the early 19th century, the East India Company has turned these fields into a monopsony, one buyer, many desperate sellers. Peasants sign advances, dadni, that leave them hostage to the company's agents. They are told what to plant, how much land to devote to poppy instead of rice or millet. When harvests fail or prices shift, their debts remain. In Calcutta's auction halls, the sticky bricks of opium are packed into stout wooden chests, Bengal and Malva chests, each roughly 60 to 70 kilograms, and branded. Under the punkah fans, auctioneers' voices echo as they sell to country traders, British, Parsi, Indian, American shipowners who will not violate the company's formal monopoly on trade with China, but will certainly violate Qing law. These traders load their chests into the bellies of fast, lean vessels, opium clippers designed to outrun both monsoon and patrol. At the other end of the Bay of Bengal and across the South China Sea, they avoid official harbors and laws by anchoring off places like Lintin Island, near the mouth of the Pearl River. There, hulks serve as floating warehouses. Chinese go-betweens, compradors and smugglers, ferry the drug to the mainland in small boats, dodging customs officers. The trade is technically illegal under Qing edicts, but in practice, silver flows back in a glittering stream. Silver is the quiet heart of this story. Britain has fallen in love with Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. In drawing rooms from London to Glasgow, kettles whistle and cups clink, millions of British workers and aristocrats alike begin their day with leaves grown in Chinese hills. But China wants little in return. British woolens and steel have few takers among Qing elites. Payment is made in bullion. Silver pours out of Britain, through India, to Canton. The balance of payments looks like a wound. Opium becomes the bandage, and the infection. By selling narcotics into China, British-controlled India can earn the silver needed to pay for tea, without draining London's reserves. The social cost, in addiction, in corruption, in families ruined, will be paid in Chinese villages far from Westminster. On the other side of this equation stands the Qing Empire. In 1839, it still stretches from the Amur to the borders of Burma, from Xinjiang's deserts to the shores of Taiwan. On paper, it is at its territorial height. In reality, its seams are fraying. Population has surged over the past century, straining land and water. Local magistrates struggle to keep order with limited yamen staff and an overgrown bureaucracy. Corruption seeps through examinations in offices like damp through plaster. Opium had entered China long before Lin Zexu's time, first as a medicine, then as a recreational smoke mixed with tobacco. As early as 1729, the Yongjing Emperor had issued edicts restricting opium dens. By 1796 and 1800, new bans targeted both importation and consumption. But edicts on paper are one thing, enforcement across thousands of miles is another. Smugglers pay bribes, local officials look away or partake, the drug seeps inward along riverways and roads. By the 1830s, memorials reaching the throne describe a different landscape, opium pipes in the hands of bannermen who should be drilling with bows and muskets, clerks dozing at their desks, fortunes smoking away day by day, households pawning jewelry and land to feed the habit. The silver that once flowed in as payment for tea now flows out to pay for opium, reversing the trade tide. Provincial treasuries complain that tax receipts, denominated in silver taels, are harder to collect. Soldiers' pay is delayed. Desertions rise. Lin Zexu reads these memorials with a prosecutor's eye. A scholar official with a reputation for incorruptibility, he has built his career on meticulous casework and harsh discipline. In 1838, the Daoguang Emperor gives him extraordinary powers as imperial commissioner, a sort of roving anti-opium czar, and sends him south to Canton with a mandate, extirpate the trade. This is not a suggestion. It is a last, desperate attempt to assert control. Lin's strategy is methodical. He begins at home, targeting Chinese smokers and dealers. Public burnings of pipes and paraphernalia turn into moral theater, pits of smoldering bamboo and clay, ashes blown by the wind as officials read out edicts promising exile or death for repeat offenders. He orders registers compiled of addicts, including officials. Doctors are made to supervise forced withdrawals. There is cruelty here, but also urgency. He believes the empire is rotting from the inside out. Then he turns to the foreigners. In the 13 factories of Canton, the tightly controlled enclave where Western merchants are allowed to reside during the trading season, he surrounds their warehouses with troops. Supplies of food and water are throttled. No ship can load or unload. Lin issues a proclamation, posted in Chinese and translated English, commanding all foreign merchants to hand over their opium stock, present or future, on pain of expulsion or worse. In London, these men will later claim they surrendered under duress. On the ground, it looks like siege warfare in silk robes. After tense days, they yield. The figures are staggering, roughly 20,000 chests, over 1.2 million kilograms of opium, are signed over to the Qing authorities. This is the mountain of contraband now tumbling, chest by chest, into the pits at Humen. It is, in modern terms, a state seizure and destruction of illegal narcotics on an unprecedented scale. For Lin, it is the visible proof he can send back to Beijing. The empire has stood up to the barbarian traders and defended its people. For the merchants, it is an act of imperial theft. While the line hisses in Canton's humid air, another kind of heat gathers thousands of miles away. Picture London in 1839, coal smoke and gas lamps, the clatter of carriage wheels on wet cobbles, files piling up in a foreign office. In a tall building near Whitehall, Lord Palmerston, Britain's foreign secretary, reads dispatches from the Pearl River Delta. They speak of chests surrendered, property destroyed, British subjects threatened. They mention Lin Zexu by name. Into these rooms comes William Jardine, retired surgeon turned co-founder of Jardine Matheson & Company, one of the largest opium firms. He has sailed home with a mission, to transform a commercial loss into a casus belli. He meets MPs, drafts memoranda, emphasizes not the drug itself but the principle at stake, the safety and rights of British subjects abroad, the sanctity of property, the outrage of an Asian official presuming to dictate terms to British traders. Behind these abstractions lies a simple fact: Jardine and his peers want their trade protected, by the Royal Navy if necessary. Palmerston is receptive. He is less squeamish than some in cabinet about the morality of the opium trade, he is more focused on Britain's role as a global power and the gospel of free trade. In his letters and cabinet minutes, we watch him perform a kind of rhetorical alchemy. The problem is never named as the defense of narcotics. Instead, it is insults to the crown, outrages upon British commerce, coercion of Her Majesty's subjects. He frames China as an archaic, exclusionary system blocking rightful access to markets and harboring a dangerous contempt for the civilized norms of treaty law. In Parliament, a handful of voices object. William Gladstone, then a young MP, calls the opium trade most infamous and atrocious. He warns that the flag is being prostituted in the name of a drug. But his words are outvoted. The expedition is approved. The calculus is cold: a limited naval war against a non-industrial power, far from Europe's balance of power traps, with high chances of victory and commercial gain. Shipyards and arsenals answer the decision. Steam-powered gunboats like HMS Nemesis are readied, bristling with modern artillery and Congreve rockets. Line of battle ships and frigates are fitted out with disciplined crews. Troops are drawn from regiments in India and from Britain itself, infantry trained for amphibious landings and coastal assaults. The instruments of force are set in motion, across months of sailing, toward the same delta where Lin's lime pits are still damp. By the time the first shots are exchanged, the destruction at Humen is already a memory. In 1839, a brawl in Kowloon, British sailors, Chinese villagers, a death, gives Lin Zexu cause to demand the surrender of the culprit. The British commander refuses. Skirmishes follow in the waters near Hong Kong and Macau. Broadsides roar, junk splinter, and suddenly the opium question is no longer about chests and decrees but about corpses in the tide. In 1840, the British Expeditionary Force arrives in strength. They do not charge blindly at Canton. Instead, they apply pressure along the coast, seizing Zhoushan Island off Ningbo, threatening the grain routes that feed North China. Qing defenders, using coastal artillery mounted on wooden carriages and firing iron balls at short range, find themselves outranged and outmaneuvered. British ships can sit beyond their effective distance and lob explosive shells into fortifications built for a different century. The shock is not only physical but cognitive. Reports reach Beijing filled with strange terms: steamships that move regardless of wind, rockets that trail fire across the night sky, small contingents of foreign troops who nonetheless hold their ground against larger Qing forces. The emperor and his advisors, raised on maps showing China at the center of concentric tribute circles, struggle to fit this asymmetry into their worldview. Some dismiss early defeats as local incompetence. Others whisper that the barbarians' weapons are truly superior. The fighting moves southward and northward like a rip in cloth. In early 1841, at the Bogue forts guarding the entrance to the Pearl River, the same narrows overlooking Humen, British ships and marines assault the positions that supposedly shield Canton. The fort's stone walls and rows of cannon look formidable, but their guns are poorly sighted and their crews are often undertrained, some reportedly themselves users of opium. The battle is brutal and short. British sailors cut grappling lines, marines scramble up parapets under fire, and by day's end British flags fly where the dragon banners once flapped. The road to Canton lies open. Further north, campaign seasons unfold. In 1842, British forces push up the Yangtze River, using steam power to shrug off contrary winds and currents, leapfrogging from city to city. Jiankang, Zhenjiang, and finally Nanjing, once the southern capital of the Ming, find foreign vessels anchored at their gates. Inland merchants panic, grain junks divert or disappear, tax caravans falter. The message to Beijing is simple: if you continue this war, the heartland's arteries can be cut. The human cost, on both sides, is immense and largely unrecorded in the kind of documents that survive. In the forts, Qing commanders often choose suicide, by sword, by hanging, by drowning, rather than face the disgrace of capture or imperial wrath. Bannermen die at their posts or flee and later face punishment. Civilians watch shells arc over the walls into warehouses, temples, homes. Some towns are looted. Others buy temporary safety with hurried negotiations. On the British side, technological superiority translates into lopsided casualty figures. Their ships and guns inflict far more than they suffer in battle. But disease does not respect metallurgy. Cholera, malaria, and dysentery ravage the encampments. Graves are dug in foreign soil, marked with crosses and regimental numbers. Officers write letters home about trifling casualties in battle and say less about the fevers that empty tents at night. By mid-1842, the pattern is clear to both capitals: the Qing court cannot expel the British by force without risking a deeper invasion, perhaps even a march on Beijing itself. The British government, for its part, has demonstrated its capacity to batter coastal defenses and disrupt trade. Now it wants a paper that turns short-term advantage into lasting leverage. That paper will be written in careful English and classical Chinese, and sealed under duress in a city of stone walls and wet heat, Nanjing. Imagine the room where the Treaty of Nanjing is signed. High latticed windows filter the river light. On the table lies the parchment with its bilingual columns. Beside it, the imperial jade seal waits, cool and opaque. British negotiators, uniforms crisp despite the humidity, sit opposite Qing officials whose faces are lined with exhaustion. They haggle over phrasing, but the broad strokes have already been imposed by Canton. The terms carve into China's sovereignty like a chisel. Hong Kong Island is ceded outright to Britain, a rocky outcrop then, not yet the neon skyline it will become, but perfectly placed as a deep-water harbor. 5 ports, Canton, Amoy, Fuzhou, Ningbo, Shanghai, are open to British trade, each to host a consul and, effectively, a semi-autonomous foreign enclave. Tariffs are fixed at low, negotiated rates, stripping the Qing state of its ability to adjust duties to its own needs. An indemnity of 21 million silver taels is imposed, payable over several years, a punishing sum that will further strain an already bleeding treasury. Notice what the treaty does not do: it does not explicitly legalize opium. The word is carefully absent. But by institutionalizing a British presence in Chinese ports, under British jurisdiction, it provides the scaffolding for the trade to continue and even expand, now under the shadow of treaty rights and gunboats. Future agreements will add extraterritoriality, most favored nation clauses, and other devices of what will be called the unequal treaties. When the jade seal is finally pressed into the wax, leaving its dragon coiled in red, an era ends. A dynasty that once set terms for emissaries from across Eurasia has, under the pressure of a narcotics-fueled conflict, signed away control of parts of its coastline and its tax policy. The humiliation will echo for generations. But to treat this as a simple story of East versus West or morality versus greed is to miss the deeper blueprint operating beneath the smoke of battle and the rustle of parchment. Look again at the ledgers of the East India Company and the colonial administration in Calcutta. Opium revenues are not a side hustle. They are a pillar of the budget. After the loss of American colonies and with vast expenditures across the empire, London leans heavily on Indian revenue to balance its books. Without opium, the finances of British India would look dangerously thin. Private traders, too, structure their fortunes around the drug, ships, warehouses, credit networks, insurance contracts. In internal correspondence, British officials admit the awkwardness. Some worry about the demoralizing effects of opium in China. Others see it as distasteful but necessary. The common thread is fiscal pressure. To give up the trade would mean either finding another lucrative export to a reluctant China or accepting continued silver outflows and higher taxes at home. On the Qing side, the memorials Lin Zexu collects and sends north spell out the social damage in granular detail: officials unable to perform their duties, soldiers abandoning posts to smoke, families selling children or ancestral lands to pay debts. But beneath the moral outrage lies the same hard arithmetic. Silver is leaving. Tax bases are eroding. A state built on agrarian revenues is watching its metallic lifeblood seep out to sea. Put bluntly, opium is not collateral damage in some other struggle. It is the strategic instrument both sides orbit. Britain uses addiction to solve an economic problem, its appetite for Chinese goods, by exporting dependency. The Qing, unable to match Britain's industrial might, tries to fight back through law and moral condemnation but cannot close the ports by force. The battlefield is the human nervous system, the objective is the balance sheet. And so we arrive at our first pattern, addiction, weaponized. Not as an unintended consequence, but as a design tool of state and corporate finance. When a government's solvency depends on a product that corrodes the society it touches, moral compromise stops being a question and becomes a budget line. Second pattern, the mask of morality over the face of material interest. Listen to the public language. From London, we hear free trade, national honor, the protection of citizens abroad. From Beijing, we hear purity of customs, the health of the people, the sacred duty of the Son of Heaven. Both vocabularies are sincere, in their way, and both are incomplete. Underneath them, each government is defending cash flows and control. The Qing wants its silver back and its tax base secure. Britain wants its tea, silk, and the markets that keep its mills spinning without draining bullion. When states talk about why they fight, they rarely foreground the ledger. It is impolite. They reach for ideals, insults, and principles. But if you lay the proclamations beside the account books, the pattern emerges. The high language is often smoke, the spreadsheet is the fire. Third pattern, the cost of misreading the technological timeline. The war exposes not just a military mismatch but a temporal one. British forces arrive with steam propulsion, shell-firing guns, standardized drills, and officers accustomed to coordinating complex naval operations across global distances. Qing commanders, brilliant or not, are constrained by tools and doctrines designed for a different era, cast-iron cannon on decaying carriages, banner armies whose prestige outstrips their training, a fragmented command structure in which provincial authorities hedge their bets and hoard forces. Information itself moves at different speeds. British policymakers can receive reasonably detailed reports from the front within months, via regular shipping lanes. The Qing court sits at the apex of a bureaucratic pyramid in which each layer filters and often sanitizes bad news. When a provincial official loses a fort, he has incentives to blame weather, treachery, anything but structural inferiority. By the time the emperor fully grasps the scale of the threat, the Yangtze open, Nanjing under the gun, the choices left are all bad. The result is a simple, brutal correlation. When a ruling system misjudges how quickly the world around it is changing, its sovereignty becomes negotiable. The bill, in this case, is paid in lost tariff autonomy, foreign-controlled ports, and a psychic wound that will help fuel later explosions, the Taiping Rebellion, the Boxer Uprising, the Revolution of 1911. And there is a fourth pattern, moral compromise under fiscal pressure. In China, addicts and their families pay with their bodies and their land. In India, peasants coerced into poppy cultivation find less space for food crops. When monsoon fails, famine looms larger. In Britain, sailors and clerks who privately despise the trade still take wages derived from it, because a family must be fed and careers advance along the channels power digs. Once a state's budget is entangled with something it cannot openly celebrate, be it narcotics, slavery, or any other corrosive enterprise, the slide toward coercion and violence becomes alarmingly smooth. Laws are twisted. Wars are justified. Those who object are sidelined as naive or unpatriotic. The First Opium War is a moment when we catch this process in the act, like a time-stamped photograph of a moral line being crossed with a quill and a cannon volley. If this sounds distant, steamships and dragon robes, tea chests and tails, look closer at the present. The patterns have not retired. They have simply changed uniforms. Consider the global opioid crisis of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Pharmaceutical companies in the United States and elsewhere develop powerful painkillers, chemically refined cousins of that same poppy latex scraped in Bengal. Marketing campaigns, backed by selective science, encourage doctors to prescribe widely. For a time, revenues soar, stock prices climb, executives collect bonuses. Regulators lag. Communities, especially rural and economically distressed ones, see addiction rates spike. Overdoses become common. Infants are born dependent. Here again, we find corporate strategies turning human vulnerability into a revenue stream, while public rhetoric emphasizes patient care and pain management. Or look at narco-economies in parts of Latin America. Peasants grow coca not because they cherish cartel violence, but because the global market pays more for illegal crops than for beans or corn. Drug consumers in wealthy countries demand their product, interdiction shifts routes but rarely demand. Governments declare wars on drugs, sometimes sincerely, often selectively. Helicopters, special forces, and sanctions follow. Producer regions and transit zones pay in blood, consumer markets treat the issue as a domestic health or policing problem. The geometry is familiar: producer regions versus consumer markets, moral rhetoric versus economic dependence, militarized responses versus slow, painful structural reforms. You can almost map Lin Zexu and Lord Palmerston onto modern counterparts, one insisting on moral harm and sovereign right to block a substance, the other invoking trade, law, and the safety of citizens while defending an economic ecosystem built around that very substance. When you hear a leader declare a war on drugs today, ask yourself, where are the Lin Zexus, and where are the Palmerstons? The fingerprints of the First Opium War are also pressed into the very map we live with. Hong Kong, whose skyline now pulses with finance and neon, exists in its modern form because a gunboat war over opium ended with its cession as a prize. Shanghai, once a sleepy riverside town, becomes a treaty port and then a cosmopolitan hub precisely because the treaties of the 1840s pried it open. The extraterritoriality clauses that follow, placing foreigners under their own consular courts rather than Chinese law, build an architecture of legal inequality that will haunt Chinese political memory. In modern China, the phrase "century of humiliation" is not an abstract slogan, it is a narrative in which the Opium Wars are chapter 1. The memory of foreign gunboats forcing open harbors and dictating tariffs informs Beijing's intense sensitivity about sovereignty, about foreign military presence in East Asian waters, about control over its own markets and currency. The rapid modernization of the People's Liberation Army Navy, the emphasis on never again allowing China to be carved by foreign powers, these are living echoes of the day Jade Seals met foreign treaties under duress. Economic warfare has also evolved, but the logic from opium to sanctions is a straight line. Where 19th-century Britain used narcotics and gunboats, 21st-century powers use banking systems, export controls, tariffs, and technology choke points. Cutting a rival off from swift payment networks, limiting access to advanced semiconductors, manipulating energy supplies through pipelines, these are today's ways of exploiting dependency. They do not look like crates of opium chests in a lime pit, but they are cousins. When a country's prosperity hinges on another's oil, rare earths, microchips, or shipping lanes, the possibility of coercion is always present. The tool may be framed as legal, sanctions for human rights abuses, export controls for security, but the underlying mechanism is the same as in 1839, identify the substance or system the other side cannot easily live without, then squeeze. This is why the Opium War still matters, far beyond Chinese or British history. It is an early, brutally honest demonstration of a world that has since become normal, corporations fused to state power, technology outrunning law and ethics, human weakness, whether for pleasure, relief, or daily necessities, systematically turned into leverage. Here, then, is the verdict this case forces upon us: when wealth and power discover that the softest parts of human nature, our cravings, our dependencies, our need for comfort, can be harnessed as instruments of policy, they will reach for them, again and again, unless we build structures that say no. Hold that up as a mirror to the present. Ask yourself, what are the opiums of our age? Maybe it is a pill in a medicine cabinet, or a line of credit, or the glow of a screen you feel uneasy without. Maybe it is cheap fast fashion, or just-in-time deliveries that depend on labor and logistics you never see. Somewhere, some balance sheet is improved by keeping you hooked, on convenience, on stimulation, on a substance, on a platform. Somewhere, someone has asked the same question the East India Company once did: how do we turn this habit into reliable revenue? The story of Lin Zexu and Lord Palmerston, of Humen's lime pits and Nanjing's treaty table, matters now because it strips away the polite illusions. It shows us how easily free trade can become our navy, your addiction. It explains why, in parts of the world, globalization is heard not as opportunity but as the distant echo of gunboats in the fog. And it warns that technological superiority, without moral restraint, tends to write its values into other people's laws at cannon point, or its modern equivalents. This investigation does not end with one verdict, it opens into a larger case file that we are still writing. Join the investigation. Treat history not as a gallery of curiosities but as a crime scene, with patterns that repeat under new aliases. When you read about a new trade agreement, a new sanction regime, a new war on something, drugs, terror, misinformation, ask, what is the substance or system at stake? Who profits if dependence deepens? Who pays if it is abruptly cut off? As fellow detectives in the archives of humanity, your task is not only to learn what happened, but to test your world with these patterns: addiction as strategy, moral language masking material interest, technological time gaps turning sovereignty porous, budget spending ethics until they break. Look at your own life, your own country, your own workplace. Where do you see the outlines of an opium chest, even if the label has changed? And now, the legacy question, the one no search engine can answer for you. Imagine you are in Lin Zexu's position, or Palmerston's, but transported to today. You sit in a quiet office while outside, unseen, millions depend on a product or platform that fills your state's coffers yet clearly harms the fabric of society, eroding attention, health, trust. If you move to cut it off, you risk economic crisis, unemployment, perhaps even the destabilization of your government. If you let it run, you buy time with other people's futures. In that chair, with that pen, what do you do? Whose pain do you choose, and what story do you tell yourself to live with it? History will record whatever you sign. The real judgment happens earlier, in the quiet between your heartbeat and your decision, where no treaty and no chronicle can fully follow. That is the place where the next Opium War, whatever form it takes, will either be averted, or begin.